At Pastime, we offer GPS solutions that connect vehicles and protect assets. Our technology allows you to locate a vehicle with pinpoint accuracy. And with our data analytics, dealers and finance companies can make better decisions and reduce risk. The result? Fewer defaults, fewer delinquencies, easier, lower cost recovery, and increased value for your portfolio, and improved customer communication. Visit us at pastimegps.com to learn more.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to the NIDA Virtual Convention 2020. A lot of what we're going to talk about today are things that have changed since the beginning of time and things that will change as we go forward. And pretty much you need to think of these as best practices and some ideas. I don't expect all of you to do them all or change what you're doing, but listen to these ideas about how to do the best job of underwriting so that you may get the best results as well as do it compliantly and do it consistently, and we'll share that as well. So kind of we start here, we'll start with what is underwriting and why do we do it? We've got a couple goals. I cannot predict, nor can you tell me who's going to pay out their loan by sitting down, looking at a credit application or gathering all the data. And we're in a very high-risk business with a high-risk customer. So our goals in the underwriting process are really to determine who gets credit and who does not. That's very simple. And certainly if we don't take any risk and don't approve anybody, our losses will be very low, although our business won't last very long. The second part of it, and probably the more important one, is that we're going to create what we say a suitable risk, is to mitigate the loss potential in a loan. And so what does that really mean? Let's make sure we've got the customer in the right car with the right payment and the right term to try to maximize their opportunity for success in these loans. And that has historically been a bit challenging. We want to make sure that we're compliant with all laws and share some stories of things that are going on today, and we might scare you straight on some of those items. We also want to be consistent in our underwriting. We want to make sure that we're doing the same thing over and over again and try not to let subjectivity enter the decision making. And what I mean by that is, how many of us know, based on someone's job time or based on someone's job type, if they're going to pay or not? Well, psychologists have figured out that most of us can only think about those kinds of things that have happened in the last 3, 5, 10, maybe 30 days. So what ends up happening a lot of times is we make a decision based on the fact that something bad happened in the last 30 days or something good happened in the last 30 days based on someone's job type. I'll never forget, I had an underwriter who worked for me and he goes, I don't like temporary jobs. And I said, well, okay, but we have a scoring model for temporary jobs. He goes, and the reason he said that is because he had 2 repos that week from temporary jobs. Although when we pulled all the data, we found out that temporary jobs versus full-time permanent jobs were not very different, but it got into his head and he made a subjective decision based on that. We're trying to eliminate that for a variety of reasons. Our goal is to create a loan that has an excellent chance of success. And our goal here is to make sure that we have done everything we can to make sure we're making a wise decision, a good decision, and that we do it the same way every time. Now, underwriting will also only get you so far. I don't know what you all think, but we've kind of said that, hey, if I've got a customer who we put on the street and they're on the books and current 6 months from now, we probably did a pretty good job of underwriting. It does not mean that they're safe and free and ready to go move on. They could still go bad, but they basically, at that point, either have a car problem or a change of life problem. In some cases, they have both. But we did the right things getting them out the door. So what I'm going to share with you now is a little bit about our underwriting today versus the past, and kind of let you understand where we've evolved to, where we're going to go in the future. And again, I'm taking a lot of what you see here from my experience, first being in the business in 1988, all the way through last week when I did a 20 group meeting, and see where things have changed. And in many cases, it's for the better. In some cases, because of need and necessity, and not just because we're getting wiser. But underwriting in the good old days there was very little effort. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget my first month in business. We pretty much approved everybody who walked in the door, and they said, well, how do we decide who gets a car? And they go, we just use the mirror test. And the mirror test is very simple. If they fogged a mirror, they got a car. Well, I thought that was really kind of scary until I realized that the amount of risk we were taking in those days was very small. We sold 110 cars my first month in this job, 1988, and we had $11,000 cash and deal for the entire month. And what that basically means, for those who don't understand the term cash and deal, that was the amount of our money we put in the street. That was the total value of the cars, what we paid for them, plus what we did in reconditioning, plus closing costs, minus down payment. Well, at $11,000 for 110 cars, you can pretty much approve everybody. Today, our benchmark for cash and deal, or money we put in the street, is well over $6,000. So this has become a very high risk business from a financial standpoint. And keep in mind that some of you guys may be watching this saying, well, I'm half that number. Well, $3,000 a car, 30 cars a month, is almost $100,000 of risk every month. Some of you guys may be double that number. You may be $12,000 cash and deal. But it's a lot of risk, and we really want to make sure that we're protecting our ownership's money, our investors' capital, and certainly if we have lines of credit, making sure we're taking care of our bank by trying to do our due diligence to make sure we put the right customer in the right cars. Now, the good old days where down payment was the determining factor. As a matter of fact, if you had a big down payment, you could probably be a serial killer. We didn't care if we were out of the car on day one. And what we're trying to tell people in the underwriting aspect only is that down payment does not make a bad person good. Now, it makes your risk lower, and that's a very good thing. But the reality of it is, don't let the down payment or pure deal structure all by itself determine that this consumer is a good risk for our business model. The old days too, when we did do verifications, if we had some sort of checklist or process to go through, we would verify their customers' jobs, their home, their references. We would interview them, and then we would close them. And this became a several-hour process. And in some cases, it ended up being several days. And pretty much all we were getting is affidavits from people who are vouching for our customer and not using the data at hand, and certainly not using our own experience to make wise decisions. That is just far too subjective, and potential defective decision-making happened every day. When people think they're good underwriters, I always challenge them to one thing. Go back and look at a pool of loans, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 1 quarter. Take those loans and see how many of them paid to the very end. And you might be surprised how good, or in many cases, how bad an underwriter you really are when you're using pure subjectivity and gut feeling on customers. So today, we've changed up that model quite a bit. We've decided, hey, if I'm going to put $6,000 of my money in the street as I sell every car, then I better determine the creditworthiness of the consumer, and do I want to take this risk? And then, of course, making sure I take the appropriate amount of risk so that I'm not going to be in a position where I'm going to be hurt badly, and certainly don't want to hurt the customer. Customers that become repos are really bad news. They do not buy another car from you, and they will rarely, if ever, refer people to you. So again, our ultimate goal is to try to make sure that every car we deliver has a very good chance of being successful, paying out, and coming back and seeing us again. So today, the down payments vary widely, and deal structure is less important than credit or behavioral review. We really do care that they have an appropriate down to get to the payment they can afford. That's what down payment's truly for. We have done a lot of studies and found that down payments between $0 and $2,000 down have very little or very immaterial differences in charge-off rates. It starts going up from there. They get better and better. But for a lot of us, if I said I'm just going to do deals with $2,000 down or more, I probably wouldn't do very many deals. And certainly you have to structure the deal so that the car runs the note, and also the customer runs the note. 25 years ago, we started doing 48-month loans, which was really unheard of at the time, and we learned something very valuable with that. And the biggest thing we learned was the car ran the note, but the customer was tired and fatigued by the payment long before 4 years is up. And it really makes sense, is that there's very little that they've done in their lives for 4 years in a row. And certainly that car they had to have the day you sell it becomes a car bill rather quickly. So we want to make sure that we structure those deals so the customer's in an affordable situation and that they get out of it as soon as possible, see light at the end of the tunnel. But all in all, that is not truly what underwriting the customer is about. Now, the good news today is most verifications of those important factors like job, where they live, even references and interviews, and finding out all this information with the internet, we can get a good idea of who our customer is really quickly if we just use the technology that's available to us. So we want to make sure that you guys do that. The other thing is the availability of data. I know there didn't used to be a lot of data, and certainly the credit bureaus didn't even allow way back when for us to pull credit bureaus on people. But beyond credit bureaus and all the public data out there and all the online data from social media to Googling people out there, you can find out a lot about your customer rather quickly and find out everything you need to know to make the loan. So one of the things that's interesting is when we first started doing underwriting, we basically said everybody rides, and that became a lot of people's slogans in there. But you got to be sure that the income requirements, that you actually put customers in cars that they can afford. I mean, that's your duty. That's not the customer's duty. Customers will get the most amount of car and ask for the most amount of car and buy the most amount of car. You'll let them. So you kind of have to play parent a little bit here and say, hey, this is based on our results and our loss rates, that this is the car that you can afford based on your income today. Now, again, when you had cars where you were out of the car with a down payment and maybe a pickup payment or two, you probably just rolled the dice and took the risk and knew that you didn't have much to lose. But today you've got to be really cognizant and aware of the fact that you can actually cause people to become charge-offs because you gave them too much car payment. And I had a dealer this last weekend say to me, but they said it was okay. Well, they said it was okay because they make $500 a week and the car payment's $800 a week. And they say, well, I can make that with just 1.5 weeks of pay. And I would tell you that they won't be able to do that. So we want to make sure that we do that. And PTI is that payment to income. I know a lot of finance companies use debt to income, and debt to income is a very valuable tool for prime customers and those with mortgages and revolving credit and a lot of debt out there. But for our customers, you'll find that most of them have no real debt. All their money goes to living expenses, which are not in credit bureaus. I spent a lot of years calling employers to confirm employment, and can tell you that we would slow down deals and not do deals waiting to get callbacks from employers. And today that's a very challenging thing. We collected pay stubs, but we didn't review them. We just put them in the file, said, yep, they got a pay stub. Yep, we called the employer. That employer told us they still work there. So let's rock and roll. Well, we want to make sure that in Buy Here, Pay Here, to maximize our loan success rate, that we determine what their true income is, and we determine what affordability is. And I can assure you that I've done a lot of reviews in dealerships, business practice reviews, and looked through their underwriting, got their underwriting guidelines, and compared them to the deal jackets and the finance folders to see how did you come up with affordability. And so many times I cannot figure out how they came up with this was 20% of their income or 25% of their income. I would advise all of you guys in your practices out there is not only do you want to get a pay stub, and whether you scan it, take a picture of it, keep a hard copy, copy it, you should probably create a income calculation to see what their true income is from the pay stubs and use year to dates and not just one period. To say, okay, this is what they can afford based on this true income and not the one they told us about, or just this rolling it out of 40 hours at $10 an hour, 400. And you also want to make sure that you give them a net pay in the 15 to 20% max PTI. Now, I know some of you guys go over that all the time, but again, if you want to get better performing loans, we have a lot of data that shows that the lower the PTI is, the better the loans perform. So keep that in mind as you're out there rolling people into cars to make sure that they are an affordable situation. Employer calls have gone down quite dramatically. I know a lot of dealers say they still do them, but I never see evidence that they called and got information from the employers. And many employers today will not give out employee information online or on the phone, even with an affidavit from the customer saying, please give out my data, just because there's so much liability in doing such a thing. No, I know some people say, well, we use the Work Number, which is a program and a product out there that you can call in and get some information and pay for that. Again, the information you get is, yes, they work there, maybe a start date, and you hope that's all up to date. But I will tell you that most small employers, local employers do not subscribe to the Work Number. So unless they're Walmart workers, factory workers, government workers, you're not going to even find that information there. So what have we come down to in 2020 and 2021 and beyond? Underwriting, it's pay stubs, pay stubs, pay stubs, pay stubs. getting pay stubs, getting a recent pay stub, making sure the pay stub belongs to that customer, calculating their pay over the year-to-date numbers, dividing it by the number of weeks or months that they worked there, is the real story. It's as good as you're going to get, and it certainly is probably not going to tell you anything about underwriting them for tomorrow, because tomorrow they can get laid off, furloughed, or terminated, but it just tells you where they are. The only other thing about employment that I look for is time on the job, and what we found was time on the job is very simple. Short time on the job doesn't mean they're not going to pay, but long term on the job says that they're going to probably stay in that job. Okay. It just does, again, unless they work like here in Florida, we're worried about them working for Disney World. They can work for Disney World for 20 years. I don't know that they have a job going forward. They're laying off half the staff going forward. So all that tells you is the history of that out there. The biggest challenge that's come up, and I would tell you as part of your underwriting process and your verification processes, are the pay stubs real? In the past few years, the number of fake pay stubs has climbed dramatically. There are now online websites that will produce what they call replacement pay stubs, which are really just fake pay stubs. And it's our duty to try to ferret those out and vet those to see if they're real. I have a lot of dealers who have scanned copies or created what they call evidence books of what a real pay stub looks for by employer, to make sure the ones that, when they say they work at Walmart, is this how a Walmart pay stub looks? Certainly that helps in a lot of areas. And then of course, we also had a book of fake pay stubs, because a lot of pay stubs that are fake are very generic and easy to figure out if they make sense or not. But it's important to get that pay stub, calculate their real income, and give them as low a possible payment to income as you can to have the best success. Residence verifications. Wow, this is a funny one for me, is that I never did understand this one. I probably still don't today, but in the past we would say we want to get utility bills in their name, or we want to get mail to them at that address. Well, there's a couple things that never held true. Is the number of times I pulled a deal jacket and found somebody's gas bill that was a cutoff notice and say, see, they live there. That's a head shaker for me, that you just would move forward on that one. And then of course the mail situation is what mail comes in your name to the address. And many times for our customers, their mail goes to an address that they don't live at. Okay, so I don't know, again, what that tells you about them. Many of us have waited past, and again, not done car deals because we're waiting on a customer producing a lease or a rental agreement from a landlord or from an apartment complex or duplex. I don't know. If someone said, well, they can't break them because they're illegal document, that's pretty funny. They can leave exactly 1 minute after you deliver the car to them. So I'm not sure. I guess it's a comfort level to say that, hey, there's a lease in their name at that address, and they've got a lot of time left on the lease, but it's not going to have a huge bearing on where they are. Now, you have to be old to understand the next one, which was no phone, no loan, because that's how we did a lot of things. And they did not have a landline, an actual phone plugged into the wall, wires overhead that you could call to collect from them. You didn't do the loan. Well, today, virtually nobody has a landline or a phone on the wall or on a desk in there. They have a cell phone. The only thing I can give you a little tip right now that's not on the slide is if they have a cell phone and they give you that cell phone, that's fine. Just make sure you call it while they're in the dealership, because if it's not ringing in their lap, then you've got a problem. And the last one, of course, is landlord verifications. And again, landlords are very much like employers, where what information will they give you? What can they give you? When do they break the law and create exposure out there if they tell you things they shouldn't be telling you? So be really careful with these residence verifications. I just will tell you that harder to get the agreements from the landlords. We use technology a lot to make sure that when they say they live somewhere, I can't tell you how many times I've Google Earthed somebody who gave me an address for either a job or for the residence that shows an empty lot. And I do know that Google Earth is not up to date, but we do look for these type of things. We look for companies they work for or apartment complexes they work for. Do they show up in Google? Are they something that's marketing out there and that they feel real and are real today? And that's going to give you the comfort level. But probably most important of all is as we go to $6,000+ on average in cash and deal, that ton of risk, is it not worth in 2020 putting a GPS device for about $100 on every car so that we know where our car is, where it goes, where it works, and where it sleeps all the time. It seems like a no-brainer to me, and yes, it's a little work, and yes, it's a small expense, but when Recon's $1,100, $1,200 a car, and we're buying cars for $7,000, $8,000, $10,000, it seems like far better information than what we're going to get from an affidavit from a customer or pieces of paper. Okay, this is a big one, and this one really causes a lot of consternation with my dealers out there. And I would tell you that I've taught this underwriting class for 20 plus years, and someone who has one of those first classes, you go ahead and throw that book away. But the good old days where we wanted references, personal references from the customer. We wanted 6 to 12 names, addresses, and phone numbers. We made underwriting guidelines that said at least half of them had to be family members. We had to get in contact with at least half of those before we would approve a loan, which again is a very slow and tedious process. And if a customer's in the dealership at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, who are you going to get a hold of? Are they going to talk to you? What are they going to tell you that changes your mind? And really, it's just made the process slow when, again, we know where the car is. We know where it goes every night. We know where it's going to be. And references don't owe us anything. The one thing that was really interesting to me was how many people showed me, how many dealers showed me their reference list and verification process. And again, nowhere could I see that they were even close to following it. So again, if you're not going to follow your own guidelines, it's no longer a guideline. Throw it away. It's changed so much in the last 2 years. And I will tell you, it started with some class action lawsuits. We had an indirect lender client of ours in North Carolina who went bankrupt in the last few years over unwanted calls because they took calls and made calls to references to find the consumer, to find the borrower, where they did not have permission to call, and they were calling cell phones because your customers have cell phones, their references have cell phones. So they got nailed for $1,500 per unwanted call. They found somewhere around 105,000 unwanted calls, and basically the company went bankrupt versus pay out those fines. I mean, that's how crazy it has become. So what's changed? Well, more and more dealers in my 20 groups have said, well, we're gathering them, but we don't verify them and we never call them. And I just think that's interesting. And they've told me that the only reason they want to see that is they want to see 6 or 8 or 10 family members who live in the area. So they feel comfortable that their customer is not about to run away and go to Vegas and become a showgirl. More and more dealers don't even ask for them anymore. The same things apply. If I can track my customers' movements when they're past due via GPS, I'm not sure I need to talk to their references. And someone said to me just this last weekend at a 20-year meeting saying, yeah, but the customer gave me those names. And I said, I bet they did because you required them to, but it doesn't mean you have the right to call their references. So if you're going to continue to call references, make sure you call them all, make sure you talk to them all, and make sure you get and have it recorded that they gave you permission to call them in the future. And when they tell you, do not call me anymore, it must cease right then. It's a business changer, and it's going to get worse, not better. Okay, credit bureaus. Nobody would consider pulling a credit bureau. Back in the days when I started, it just costs money. We know they have bad credit. Why would we do that? I know some of the dealers today still don't pull credit. And I will tell you that it's been my experience that those who don't pull credit and those who do pull credit, the lion's share of customers are exactly the same. Okay, this is not going to be that you're going to get worse credit or better credit customers necessarily because you pull bureaus. But I will tell you that when you market to the public that you don't pull bureaus, you are positively inviting in those very small percent, but those credit criminals out there, because that's where they're going to go. The ones who have 10 repos are going to the guy who doesn't pull credit. They're not going to the dealerships that do. Credit scores, FICO scores, Beacon scores, are they predictive? The answer is yes and no. The answers are, as the customer's credit scores, as their FICO score goes up, they become more and more predictive about future loan success. And I can tell you, though, that where we see the big kind of cutoff line, the Mendoza line, for that is the people who score 600 or higher. That's where it starts getting better and better predictive about will they pay you back. Well, that's wonderful if you get 600 FICO score customers. Below that, it kind of becomes a crapshoot. What's going in their life? What's going on in their life recently? What do we feel is going to go on in their life in the short term, which is the next 3 years? And go from there. We're not going to be able to predict just from a 450 or a 510 credit score. Beyond the big three, between Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, though, there wasn't much else you could do to find out about your customer, about their lifestyle, about their debt and their driving records and where they live and all those kind of wonderful things. So pulling a bureau was the only thing you could do. And if you guys recall, back in the day when you were printing out on a dot matrix printer, credit bureaus, they could be 10 pages long, lots of codes, lots of abbreviations, and they're very challenging to read, and certainly even more challenging to interpret that data, just to look at it all. You know, I saw a lot of highlighted ones and notes on them, but I'm not sure how you actually made a quantitative decision based on everything you just read. Well, today, again, and I'm a firm believer in pulling credit. I'm a firm believer in reporting to the credit bureaus. I think that's one thing that we can do for our customers. Is to report to the bureaus so that they can get better in their credit world and move on if they don't need us. And if not, we'll be there for them. But pulling credit bureaus is kind of one of those must-dos, or at least an alternative to a credit bureau. Now, they keep changing. Fair Isaacs, which is FICO, keeps changing the way they score people. And I know a lot of you have seen several, especially when it comes to young people who have student loans that are in deferment stage. They show up as a 650 on a FICO score, and they have no trade history on revolving or installment debt. So you really are taking a shot in the dark at that one. And again, like I said, they're not very predictive at the low score levels. Now, there's more data now due to the internet and all the companies out there that provide this alternative data or other public data that's available at a fingertip, a couple of keystrokes, and you're at these places. And whether it's public data online from your DMV or public utilities, or you're doing the alternative sources like an Accurate or a TLO, or lots of other sources out there that provide data. It's a lot of information, and it's somewhat challenging just looking at all of that data, pages and pages of it, to determine risk levels. But I will tell you, at the very least, pulling that information will serve as a very good affidavit comparing it to the credit application your customer provided you to make sure they are who they say they are and give you that level of comfort that I think you need. We just got to make sure that we've verified that information. And keep in mind that all the data that you see in every bureau is past data. It's up till this minute. Perhaps it's real time, but it's up to an hour ago, but it is all the past. And that's why part of any scoring models or any kind of review, you have to keep in mind that you have to have a little bit of subjectivity as it pertains to, you know, a 7-year-old repossession may still be on their bureau, but if it was a Chrysler credit for $812 in a prior life when they were married and had a business, and then they got divorced and the business went south and they lost their truck, probably is not very important to today's world. But certainly things in the credit bureaus such as multiple paid car loans. And car credit to me is really one of the big ones. If they paid cars off correctly, even though they've had other things go bad in their life, that's a big plus. The other thing is with the healthcare situation in our country today, if you get sick and you're poor, you're going to have medical collections, and those are going to be the last things in your life you're going to want to pay, because you have to feed your family and house your family, and paying off a hospital is going to be way down the list. The other one that shows up a lot is student loans, and again, you need to discount some of that because it's easy to get a loan, very hard to pay it back, and certainly who wants to pay back a loan if you didn't get the education that was associated with your borrowing? So it's still a great place to get some information and get the public's view of this customer and their credit profile compared to what the customer's telling you. Now, scoring models, I'm the king of making some. I laugh and I think about some of the scoring models I built back before there was a lot of data. Remember, I started this business when we didn't have computers. We did everything on a ledger card. So we couldn't even calculate interest, so we just gave 0 interest loans. But we tried, and the minute we got data, we started trying scoring models. And in the past, they were rarely created or employed. People just said, you know what, I feel good about this car deal. They had a big down payment, let's roll. And then when we built our first model, it was crude, it was proprietary, it was just for our dealership, but we just made some very common, simple data points and we scored them. And what I found crazy is, and I did this one, is that you got a phone in your name, landline, +1, no phone, -1. You made $2,000 or more in 1 month, +1. Under that, -1. I actually gave the same weight to a phone or a job. And those are the things that new modeling can change for you, that they'll tell you not only the differences, but they'll also give you the weight of the information that you have there. We just try to use common sense. And I know for a lot of entrepreneurs, and most buy here, pay here dealers are truly entrepreneurs, self-made, self-started, been very successful. Most of you, I'm going to guess, over the last 20 years or 30 years, or how long you've been in business. And it's just has been a lot of common sense, and certainly common sense plays a role in there. But if you think you're, again, like I said earlier, if you think you're a good underwriter, just go look at your charge-off rate, and maybe you're not much better than your children making these decisions out there. You want to make sure, we want to create a box. I'm going to say this a few more times during the rest of the program, but I want to go out there and write my underwriting guidelines that say this customer who models and whose profile is this are inside the box. We're going to sell them the car unless they can't find a car they like, or they don't like the decision we made based on value of car or down payment requirement. That's fine. You should be okay with that. But the thing you can't be okay with is changing your underwriting or changing every underwriting guideline just to make a deal fit. I'll give you an example that happens a lot. People say, must have $2,000 minimum monthly income. And then you go out there and say, yeah, but I added in this cash job that I can't confirm. I added in their child support, which I can't confirm they're going to continue to get. And then I rolled their mom in there because she gets some SSI. So you're trying to build a person who doesn't exist, right? This is what we cannot do. Make a box, make sure your underwriting team or your collection team or your sales manager, whoever's making these decisions, stays inside the box. As you grow your company, you're going to say, okay, there will be exceptions, and not everybody fits in the box, but who makes a decision to make those exceptions has to be somebody who's got financial skin in the game, as typically the owner, saying, okay, it's my money, I'm okay with this, or the collection side of the business or the finance company that says, you've tasked me with collecting from this customer, I can't collect from them under these scenarios, or I still think I can despite the fact they're not a complete fit in the box. Sales guys never found a customer they didn't love if they're a good salesman. So today, you can buy the scoring models. You don't have to create your own, and I'd probably argue against you creating your own unless you have true tech type people out there and you have all the data required to make good decisions out there. But from some of the longer term players like AutoZoom to some of the newer ones like Neo or CDFS, there are companies out there that can help you create a model, and it's going to create a model based on your loss experience and your business model, because although we're all buy here, pay here companies, we have varying degrees of buy here, pay here. Some of my dealers are very close to near prime and pure subprime finance companies. Others are down there in the completely unbankable, single use, here in the South we call the hoopty business, where they're just putting customers in a car with basic transportation. But your model and your loss experience needs to match your vision of where it needs to be. So we want to use our prior loss experience to determine approvals based on our business model, our collection effort, our warranties, everything out there that's going to help determine the success of that loan. The other thing we really want to make sure of is that whatever scoring model we use, either it needs to be a learning type model, right? Machine learning, use a little artificial intelligence, but at the very least be able to go back and reevaluate our underwriting scoring model and change it based on changing data over time. You got to make sure that as you get better, or you, God forbid, get worse, that your model changes to let you know what's going to make a better car loan. Changes in real life got to happen. And of course, it has to get the loan off the ground. So keeping in mind that, most of the people I talk to in the scoring model business will tell you that they're very confident in their modeling for the first 6 months or so of a loan. And again, after that, it's going to be other things that come into play. And so we just want to make sure that we get those first 6 months from our underwriting, and the other 30 to 40 or 50 months out there will be based on our collection effort and, of course, our warranties and keeping those cars running. Customer interviews, interesting customer interviews. In the past, and this happened in my dealership, so I knew early on I was the underwriter, I was the CFO, I was the lot boy, I did a lot of things, but Typically, my sales associates interview the customer, walk them through the credit app process and ask them questions. But again, any bad information that comes up from the customer to the sales associate miraculously never made it back to my ears or on my desk when it was time to make a decision. It also was done very late in the process where we've already basically told the customer all's good and now something is not good. That's a tough one. And of course, it's interesting. We used to actually have a weekly meeting with our sales team and our collectors to find out information when we couldn't collect somebody. And inevitably, our sales manager or salesman would say, yeah, but what you need to know about this customer, and rattle off 5 things: where their second job is, where they really live, where they go on their weekends, what clubs they go to. It's like, these are the kind of things that nobody knows except that salesman. Going to get make it challenging to collect that customer. And of course, the interview was just sort of a last minute chance that if someone had a really bad interview or had a really bad attitude, it was your last chance to ask them to leave the dealership and go look for a car somewhere else. A better way to do all of this is interviewing the customers, done by the underwriter or the collection team. If you do this late in the process, I certainly love to have my underwriting team interview the customer, or my collectors do it and also do the closings as well. I can tell you what worked best for me in my dealership was we did the interview before we even did an application. Okay, we basically said, have you got your pay stub? Have you got your driver's license? Fill out, and we had 10 or 12 questions on this interview sheet that just really got the ball rolling, and it asked some questions that were probably would not come up in a credit bureau. And lo and behold, have you ever been repossessed? Yes, 3 times. Pull the bureau, 0. Okay, maybe that kills their deal, maybe it doesn't, but we're certainly going to know before we get too far in the process that we need to stop this right now and move on to another customer. And of course, they're just going to match up the data searches, the credit bureau, the application, and the customer's interviews to make sure that this is really who we have. And of course, approvals and loan credits. Remember, the whole underwriting process is kind of from the minute the customer goes online and fills out an application, or the customer calls, or the customer comes in, to the point we deliver the car. The old days were the sales team made the final decisions, and I always found it humorous that they would tell me this is a good customer, and I'd always ask them, that's awesome, because I think based on their credit profile, they're terrible. But if you're willing to co-sign for them, we'll make the car deal. Never got a taker on that one. Listen, I understand, but when you're getting paid to make a sale, everybody's a wonderful person. They also had your sales team, and many of you still do this, and I would tell you, if you do nothing else after this session, stop it today. Sales team or sales manager closing loans and walking through the processes and signing the documents and discussing payments and your payment opportunities and CPI products and your GPS on the car and everything else out there that you have as part of your collection. This is your last chance to do it, and you want to make sure that we are trying our best to make sure we've given all the information to the customer. And of course, when the sales team is making those approvals, of your sales manager, and we get very subjective, we have what I lovingly call, some of you guys are going to understand this one, the end of the month deals, because we've artificially said we need to have 50 sales this month, and we're at 47 on the last Saturday. It's amazing how 3 bad deals get written on Saturday to hit that number. If you're truly underwriting and truly doing the true approval processes, you're going to have as many good loans as there were available and you can afford to fund. And that's the answer. You can give bonuses and spiffs to everybody out there for hitting arbitrary numbers, but keep in mind they are just that. So again, I want an underwriter not to be a genius and a guru with a magic 8-ball to tell me these people are going to pay or not, because they can't tell you that. I want them to verify and go through all the information, and whether it's keying it into our system or creating our own system or just scoring the customer, keep them within the box. Our underwriters need to really become verifiers. They need to make sure that everything that was given to us is true. We will score it, and then the answer will be yes or no, or it'll be yes or no, or it'll be yes, but for this amount of money, or with this much money down, or this car, or this level of car, or price of car. And then all exceptions go to either a finance manager or the ownership. And on rare occasions, if you really have to do it, go to the general manager, but never the salespeople. I want you to apply the same principle to all your loans, making sure that you are doing the same thing over and over again. It is the only way you'll know how well your underwriting guidelines match up to your anticipated results. If you change your underwriting, and I can tell you from my 450 plus 20 groups, I see somebody go, wow, your collections got really much better over the past 2 months. And they'll say, well, we tightened up our underwriting. Well, FYI, you can tighten up your underwriting tomorrow and it has virtually no impact on the loans that you did the other way. When it's 3 years worth of underwriting that's in the open loans and you just put 1 month on there. Changes in underwriting can take a long time to affect the entire portfolio, but we need to see that we're doing the same thing over and over again, and that will start to spot trends where we truly may need to tighten up, whether it's more money down, whether it's less money in the street, whether it's shorter terms, whether it's longer job times or residence times. But when you make those changes, keep in mind, it won't change the world overnight. And then, of course, I want my loans closed by somebody who is independent of the sales operation or part of the collection team. I know when I had one dealership, our collectors were our closers because they'd come out there and say, hello, I'm your account rep. I'm here to see you be successful in the loan. Let's go through all the information you need to be successful in the loan and what to do when you have trouble. And of course, I want to be really, as an owner, I want to be positive that I can say without a doubt, and whether it's a closer, whether it's a script, whether it's a video, whether you use the avatars and secure close, it doesn't matter to me as long as you can say, I feel 100% positive that we closed every loan the exact same way. We told the customer what their responsibilities were to us and what our responsibilities were to the customer. And that's our last chance. The minute the customer leaves, they're in control of the lion's share of this loan servicing process. And in conclusion, again, I always tell people, if it ain't broke, there's no need to fix it. If you have got a process that you feel comfortable with and it's getting the results you want, don't change anything just because Chuck said, here's some better ways to look at some of this stuff. But keep in mind, if you're not getting the results you desire or have modeled for, or just say, I want to improve, I see where we are, but I'd like to be better, then you can start looking at things that we've talked about here and many others and say, I'll take this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I may not do that. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is that you ask is, are you approving loans in a compliant manner? And compliant can be Fair Credit Act. It can have to do with race and disparate impact on certain protected classes. Those have all come up in the past several years from the CFPB. And the biggest one today is, if you guys want to Google this, please do. Santander class action lawsuit from 30 plus states, attorney generals. They paid a fine of $550 million for putting customers in cars they should have known, could not afford, or did nothing to verify income. And just most recently, Credit Acceptance has been sued by the Attorney General of the state of Massachusetts for $120 million for very much the same thing, as well as some collection activity that they were doing that was illegal in the state of Massachusetts. But they have 30 plus AGs looking at that Massachusetts case to see if they have a case for their state and their constituents in their state as well. So be compliant. None of us wants to put a customer in a car they can't afford, and it is challenging to know exactly how much they can afford. But remember, shorter term, better. Lower payment, better. All those things have been proven out in static pool after static pool. Being consistent, listen, if I'm going to say you got to have a 6-month job and 50% of my people have less than a 6-month job, then you don't have a guideline there. It's better to write a tight guideline and loosen it up and find out we've been doing it wrong for a long time and we need to tighten up now because you've let a lot of horses out of the barn by then. Is it measurable? Because if it's not measurable, if it's not defensible about why you did a loan or why you didn't do a loan, really consider, should you be doing that? Ask yourself, are you putting the right customers, which is the ones you want to approve or say no to and turn them down? And are they in the right vehicle? And for me, it's always been, we did payment calls for most of my career instead of saying, this are the 3 cars you can buy. Because for me, any customer can buy any car on my lot with the right down payment. The right down payment doesn't make them a better customer, but what it does, it gets them to the payment they've been approved for. So you may want to consider getting customers an approval based on a term and a monthly payment or a weekly or biweekly payment and say, look, if you want a car that's $2,000 over what the bank approved you for, we need $2,000 for that car. We need $1,000 for the more down for the one under that. And then of course, if the car you've been approved for are these cars here based on what you have down today and what the bank approved you for. That always works the best. And say to yourself, am I maximizing my loan's success potential? Am I giving my customer the best chance of being successful out of the gate and not putting them in a bad situation or us? And then lastly, am I minimizing my financial risk? So these are the things you got to do up front. If you do these things, you'll get out of the gate, you'll have great 6 months, and then after that, it's going to be down to your collection team, and we'll talk about that in another session. If you have questions, because we're doing this virtually, what we're going to do for you is you will go ahead and type in your questions, and so they'll come to me in an email format, and I will either email you right back as soon as I get the question, or in some cases, it may go along a little further than that if the question and my answer is more involved. But stay tuned, enjoy the rest of the show. I thank you for your time. Have a great show.